I want to talk about this because when I take listings and I'm presenting offers to our sellers, we receive an offer from Rocket Mortgage.
Yep.
And that's their pre-approval. And there's nobody for me to call, reach out to, or get a voice-to-voice conversation on whether or not that buyer is truly qualified to purchase the home. From my end, I see an offer submitted by a buyer agent, and their approval comes from Rocket Mortgage. I'm not incentivized in any way, shape, or form to vouch for that buyer when I present it to the seller.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the concern too. Look at it from if you have a listing, and you're trying to sell that property. If you have 3 or 4 offers, and let's say they're all the same exact amount purchase price wise, they're all offering the same dollar amount. You're then going to dissect it with the terms, and then if they all have mortgages, you're going to start chopping apart the pre-approval letters. And if it's a pre-approval letter that comes from me and Informed Mortgage versus something that Rocket Mortgage presents, it's not even comparable.
Yeah. So in what aspect would you say, in terms of like giving people an understanding of why it's not comparable, what's the difference in value when somebody's presenting an offer with an approval loan application from Rocket Mortgage and when they're working with Evan Beach?
Yeah, I mean, we view ourselves, and we are mortgage professionals. Like, this is all that we do. So when I'm talking to someone from start to finish, I'm first of all educating them and informing them on the market conditions, number one, because a lot of people just think that it's still HGTV and it's still 2014, and they're going to go in and lowball an offer, and I tell them, just don't waste your time in this market, But I'm going to educate them on the whole market, what it looks like, really what it looks like to potentially take on, which normally is the largest financial transaction you make in your life, is buying a home, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're lucky enough to inherit a bunch of money or something like that, or you're a Bitcoin savant like you are, and you're a Bitcoin millionaire.
In 2012.
Yeah. So unless there's a situation like that, normally when somebody is applying for a mortgage and trying to borrow $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $800,000, that's normally the largest financial transaction they make in their life. So they first of all need to be educated on what it looks like to take that on, and does it make sense for them to take that on. One of the first questions I always start when I have a phone conversation with someone on an initial consultation is, what are you trying to spend per month?
You always say this is, there's 2 things you want to find out: how much you can spend, but also more importantly, how much you want to spend.
Yeah, it's always, not only what you can afford, but it's what they want to afford. Because a lot of people, there's other things going on in people's lives that, even though we do very much a deep dive into their finances to get them, approved for a mortgage, there's other things that we don't see. Do they have kids? Like, obviously I know if they have kids, but kids are freaking expensive, man. Like, I got 2 of them. I got 2 of them at home. Those things are expensive, Thankfully, we're out of daycare and all that now, but summer camp, we're striking a check for $5,000-$6,000 for summer camp, like that's stuff that doesn't show up on credit reports and in typically their monthly budgeting that they're going to put aside for mortgages.
But that's something they still have to take into account, is those living expenses that aren't necessarily going to be incorporated on the debt to income ratio.
Absolutely. Maybe they're a couple that likes to go on 3 vacations a year, and they spend $20,000 on vacations. And you got to set up. Every household should have a P&L. It's a business. A household is a business. And to jump back into what the initial question was, I mean, the reason why we approach it like that is the reason why a lot of deals were falling apart a year, 2 years ago, when rates really jumped up and basically doubled in a matter of 4 or 5 months, which made my job so much fun.
Yo, me too. Me too.
It was awesome.
That was a good year.
So much fun.
Lots of business.
Yeah. Thank you. 2022. So when that happened, the reason why a ton of deals were falling through at that point is because people were having offers accepted from a loan officer, pick any type of mortgage lender, whether it's Rocket Mortgage or anyone else. And it was such a breakneck speed of how the rates went up that they weren't educated on it. So they would have an offer accepted thinking that the rates were 4%, and then all of a sudden they're going to lock in their interest rate a month later, and it was 6.5% or whatever the case may be. Now all of a sudden their payment that they thought was going to be $3,000 is, $3,800, and they're just sitting there like deer in headlights. Well, we don't want to spend that, and then they're pulling out of the transactions.
Yeah.
It was happening all the time because people weren't educated on where the market's at. So that's why we always take the time to educate people up front about all of those things that are going to go into a mortgage. Most importantly, what they want to spend per month, and what they're comfortable. The two things are going to dissect in any real estate transaction is going to be monthly payment and what they're going to want to bring to closing. And what I mean by that is their down payment and their closing costs. So those are the two numbers you're going to look at: monthly payment and, hey, the check you're going to have to part with at closing. And we want to be able to diagnose that for the people as we're going through this, because it's very much an important step. And just because somebody tells you can do something doesn't mean you should do it, right? I can come back to people, and a lot of times people don't realize pre-approvals everyone has in their head. Hey, I got pre-approved. I can go buy a house. I can go buy a $600,000 house. Okay, pre-approvals, first of all, aren't done on purchase prices. They're done on maximum monthly payments. That's the way it is. That's the way it's always been. Because purchase prices are going to not be accurate because, you're pre-approved for $600,000 in what market? Was it a year ago? Was it this week? Was it yesterday? What market are you pre-approved for $600,000 in? Because somebody that was shopping in the beginning of 2022 or the end of 2021, that $600,000 now may be only $400,000. You know what I mean? Their buying power could have gone down significantly due to the interest rate and market conditions.
Yeah.
So it's very important for people to understand that. And I always say, when you put in an offer, you want it to have a very good chance of being accepted, and that's where you guys would come in when it comes to your expertise as far as comparable sales in the area, really getting in a relationship with the seller's agent to see what the goal of the sale is, because it's not always just price. Everybody wants to sell their house for top dollar, but like you said, a lot of times terms are very important. If it's important to them to get the hell out of that house in 20 days, what does it matter what you're, all that stuff.
Moving is a very high level. There's a high level of emotion that's happening for anyone who's relocating or moving. And if you're buying a house, I mean, you could be buying it from a family, from a couple, from somebody who just needs to get out for whatever personal reason.
Yep.
And the offer, outside of price, the terms and conditions have to align with their goals.
Sure.
And that's the best way to really get it accepted outside of putting in a higher bid, a higher price, is aligning the offer to accomplish the seller's goals, so then they have a seamless transactional experience.
Of course.
And that'd be the only other way to get it accepted outside of price and representation with the quality of the approval.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's why it's a team effort. Like you're not having offers accepted in this market unless you have a buyer's agent that knows what the hell he or she is doing. And is educated on the market and has relationships with sellers agents that are listing these properties. And unless you're buying it in cash, as I said, and you need to have a lender that's educating you the correct way and doing the pre-approval letter, or pre-approval in general, the right way, and having it fully underwritten, having findings run, having proof of assets, all those things, because sellers agents are asking for those kind of things right now.
Yep.
I mean, think about how many times you present an offer, and I mean, we've had it a couple times in the deals we've closed this month still, right? We're still in April right now. Yeah.
Are we in April? Is it May? It's April.
Still April, yeah. It says it right there.
Oh,
but they've I think on both of them they were kind of scrutinizing proof of assets, things like that. I know on one of them we had to send proof of assets. So it's important to have that stuff ready to rock and ready to go. To have the best chance of having an offer accepted. And again, I always say not just having an offer accepted, but having an offer accepted that makes sense for the buyer, for your client, right? Because anybody can go in and on a $500,000 property that's listed, anybody can go in and offer $650,000, right? And there's a pretty darn good chance they're going to accept your offer. But was that in the best interest of your client and the buyer? Probably not, right? Although now we're seeing properties that are selling for six figures over list price. But point being, like you want to make sure you always have the best interest of the buyer in mind and educate them as much as you possibly can in this market, because it's a tough market to buy right now, historically so. So, a lot of times, regardless of how much I may educate them and you may educate them, sometimes they got to get burned on a few offers and realize that, hey, I wasn't even close on this one. If I'm going to be in this price range, I need to realize that I have to offer 10% over what the list price is in this particular market, or whatever the case may be, whatever you would advise them on that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like we're really just advisors, just educating people to make the best decision possible for them and their family. But at the end of the day, it's their decision. And when I work with a new client or a new buyer, it's not an easy thing to go out looking at homes, telling them that they have to offer 40 grand over the asking price to get it accepted.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes getting burned on 2 or 3 offers for them to kind of come up with the understanding that you're right. In order for us to get our offer accepted, we have to bid 34 grand more than asking price on this house.
Yeah, and it goes hand in hand with the mortgage financing. Like I said, unless they're buying the property in cash, like they need to understand that, first of all, set a budget monthly payment wise, like I mentioned, like figure out what your cap is there and go back from that. But a lot of times we have to educate people that, all right, you're looking at properties at the top of your budget. You're looking at a property that's 600 grand. Like that's the max that you want to spend per month, or that's the max that you're approved for, right? You shouldn't be looking at a property that's 600 grand. You should be looking at properties that are
550.
Exactly. I was even going to say lower, but
530.
Yeah, exactly.
Or 99.
I was going to say 525, 530 if that's the case, because then they're probably going to end up in that 585, 590, 600 purchase price range anyway. So a lot of people don't realize that, though. They're looking at, they'll go on and then they'll start at Zillow and they'll see a property that they like in a neighborhood they like, and they think that the purchase price, makes sense, because that's what the consumer's always been taught to believe, is that you look at the purchase price alone. But there's a multitude of other things that go into the purchase, interest rates, what the property taxes are, what type of property is it. If it's a condo, there's HOA fees involved, which is going to bring down their purchase price even more. There's a lot that's going to be dissected in every real estate transaction.